chord goes next?
Maple syrup.
Yeah, that chord. It sounds real weird. Maple syrup. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Maple Syrup Show. I'm your co-host, Senfeng Lim, and we have our other co-host here.
Oh, Sen is freezing.
You can say your name, Erica.
Yeah, sorry.
Am I frozen?
You froze there for a second there. I am Erica Weiris, and we have a lovely guest with us today.
Hi, I'm Nicole Cutler.
We do.
All right, we're all about Nicole's journey and livelihood in the gaming industry.
That's the goal for tonight. So before we start going into what you're doing now, everybody's always interested on where our guests started. When did you start playing games? How did you go from playing games to being part of the industry that makes games? What's your origin story?
So I first started playing games around 2013, 2014. And then around 2016, I learned that there was a convention that people go to. My friend group was like streaming on the side, so we decided to go to BGG. And I met Peter C. Hayward, who had just that year started Jelly Bean Games. And we became friends. And over the course of several months, I realized that he is the typical new creator who had found Kickstarter but didn't really have any business background. And I had a background in business administration and bookkeeping. So I started helping him slowly, and it just sort of evolved into me running the company with him for a few years. And from there, I became the production manager over at Pandasaurus, and now I'm the director of projects at Arcane Wonders.
See, she's going to work for everybody.
There you go. Well, I mean, let's just admit it that everybody in the industry probably needs a Nicole Cutler. Like, if we could clone Nicole, I think every company would benefit from having a Nicole Cutler.
Someone who's going to tell you how to properly work on your finances and make sure you don't overextend yourself and actually work on your production schedule. And oh my God, there's things you have to do behind the scenes.
And I'm not just buttering Nicole up because she's our guest. But
it's an important job.
It's not only an important job, but Nicole does it really well. So even when Nicole was between jobs, Nicole was laying down science on Twitter. If you didn't follow her on Twitter, I was shaming you for not following her on Twitter. If you're in the board game industry and you want to make board games, or you're trying to kickstart or something, Nicole was dropping pure knowledge on Twitter while she was transferring over to Arcane Wonders, and there was some daily gold there, and so Nicole is well versed in what will make a company successful from a project management side of things. So tell us, in terms of Arcane Wonders, your new home, what brought you to Arcane Wonders? What's going on there right now, and how do you fit into that company?
So I actually took a bit of I'm going to steal Sen's word because he's talking about his upcoming sabbatical eventually that he's going to take. I took a little bit of a sabbatical from the board game industry.
Says that, but it'll never happen.
I had to take a little bit of a break because the baby was, we were home and daycare was not an option. So I took a little bit of a break, and I put in my notice with Pandasaurus because they offered to hold my job for me, and I just realized that I couldn't commit to coming back in a time that made sense. So after they, rehired out my role, I'd mentioned to my friend Robert Geislinger, who's the sales manager at Arcane, that I eventually start looking, and that just conversation happened kind of organically. And I know they were looking at other candidates too, but it just kind of, the role really meshed well together. So. And I was very fortunate that they were willing to wait until I was able to start again.
Because you're
right.
You gotta wait for the good stuff.
Well, right. I mean, that's kind of the thing about it all. You can, there are things that are worth waiting for, and apparently Nicole Cutler is one of those things. And so you went into Arcane Wonders into a project management position. Now, a lot of people out there like designer and graphic designer and publisher and illustrator, but they do not know necessarily in the board game industry, what does a manager of projects do? And for those of you out there, I use that title because that is what Nicole wrote in her email.
We were laughing because she gets an extra word of.
Yeah, it's like super fancy.
So there's a lot.
Well, I was gonna say the funniest thing is you could ask people the difference between a designer and a developer and probably get more accurate information than what a project manager is.
Probably.
Well, a lot of people want those roles, I feel like this industry really drives creatives and people who want to like make their own thing, and not a lot of people who just kind of want to be in the shadows, making sure the gears are turning.
The business side running. The people who actually want it to make money.
I know so many companies don't really like do budgeting on projects and like calculate, well, like, okay, well, the art cost this, but also how much did staff cost to make, for the 6 months that made this project get off the ground. And like, it's so important to make sure that a project is making money. But so my role right now is to basically, from whenever a game gets signed to when it's ready to go into production, I kind of oversee the entire thing, make sure, dev is happening when we're planning for it to happen, making sure that contractors are being hired when they need to be, and deadlines are sticking across, 20, 30 projects at a given time.
So when you're scheduling, are you finding one of the biggest things then is too, if you're scheduled properly, you are saving money?
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel it works. I mean, there are always things to look out for that aren't necessarily just sticking to a schedule. But I've had situations where we didn't realize how far we were behind on a project, not with Arcane, because I've just started, but in general. And you have to pay more money for someone to like do rush fees, or, double the rate for an editor. Like it costs money to not be on top of your projects.
Right.
And that, and forgetting something, like if someone made a change and you didn't notice it and you sent the wrong file to the printer, well, there's your entire print run. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, or you have to print out errata, and your product will get rated poorly, and it's just like a finger in your eye for the year of that product is out. It's like, I got to get that finger out of my eye. Could have stopped it with a project manager. And it's really interesting that I find that I was talking about this, like, I think last week or the week before, when and Erica, you were there, actually, I think. Yeah, for sure you were there.
Sure.
When Scott Gata and I were having an argument about developers and project managers. And it wasn't really an argument. It was more of a discussion about, what does the industry need more of? And Scott was like, project managers. And I was like, developers. And I think both are necessary. But what I've seen over this whole weird pandemic that we've had, I would much rather have a project manager on my side than a developer in-house. 100%.
I feel like there's more people who could do a decent job developing than there are people who could honestly do a decent job project managing, just because everybody, realistically, anyone who's a designer
can do
probably has the skills to be a developer to a degree.
Yeah, maybe the personality, but the skills. They have the skills.
That's a huge pool of people who basically could do both. I don't think that applies to project managers.
No, there's very few like illustrators who would be good project managers, or designers who would be good project managers. And I've just seen projects go off the rails in the pandemic because we're constantly getting new news. Like, hey, now everything costs 25% more because it's made out of paper. Or, hey, that stuff that you expected to be shipping in this month, you're going to have to wait like 6 weeks. And that means you have another 6 weeks of storage costs. Oh no.
Freight right now is double what it was when I left Pandasaurus.
Have you seen the price of wood?
What? Like, since just December?
No, seriously. Have you guys seen the price of wood? Like,
yeah.
Okay, let's say, so it's gone up. Like the price is basically times 3 what it was. So let's say something used to be like $30 a sheet. Now it's 90. Wood's
that's not a good thing.
insane.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we talked about the price of wood and the price of plastic a while ago. Like you cannot bottom out on wood. Wood will always have a higher ceiling at its lowest price, whereas plastic ends up being pennies per unit. Eventually, the price just goes down. It's the molding and the casting that costs.
You have a high enough production run.
Yes, which is why you're going to see, I think what we're going to see is some people making higher volume runs to be able to do things.
Or sourcing existing products more than they would have before, which is definitely an option that I don't think enough people necessarily explore.
Yeah, true. They
Yeah.
want custom, right?
There's lots of random
Yeah.
weird stuff that's out there and already made.
So tell us, Nicole, what in your mind, if you had to define the role of a project manager or a manager of projects, what would that be?
What
would
earns you the of? Like,
Yeah,
that's
what's
what we
the
really want to
essence?
know.
It is the person who takes responsibility at the end of the day for anything that goes wrong.
Like the buck stops with Nicole.
The buck stops with me.
So you got to be the tough person too, then, because you're kind of always the person on the line.
Yeah, and I'm used to being the person who delivers bad news. Like, sorry, we're not going to hit this street date. Like, it's just not going to happen. And taking whatever that means.
No, that's actually a really good personality note, because not everybody's good at that kind of thing. And if you're the person who basically, it's like, look, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news like all the time. It's basically my job. So, if you can accept that, awesome. If you're going to take it personally, not the job for you.
That's a good
I
point.
am a professional negative Nancy.
Yeah.
You don't strike me as that, like just personality-wise.
But it's
You're
necessary.
always smiling and happy.
It's not. Yeah. No, Nicole's awesome. But if she's telling you something's bad, it's bad for a reason.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say, and that's not necessarily negative. Yeah. I just think you're like straight up. Like you're a straight shooter. That's when I think of Nicole Cutler, I think straight shooter.
Thank you.
She's gonna tell you the goods. No, literally, that's what I think of you. You're gonna tell me it's straight, and that's the facts.
Yeah, direct in the right way.
I plan when I manage a project from start to finish. I plan for extra time because I just don't like disappointing people. I'd rather have like the product in a warehouse 4 weeks earlier than like tell someone it's gonna be 4 weeks late. So I try to avoid the negative part of it, but it does happen.
Sure.
Like, it's not my fault, it's yours.
I mean, that's inevitable, right? Things beyond our control go out of control. And I think it's how we deal with them that make us good or bad at certain roles. What kind of skills does a project manager need as well as personality traits? What do you think?
I think a project manager has to be very organized. Like I need software. I need to know what's happening on every project at any given moment. And the dedication to like sit there and like make notes that you might not think are important at this time. Like, okay, Robert said that he was, pinging this person about something. And it just seems like unnecessary to like note that somewhere. But you do when you're looking. I do because when you're looking
or recorded or
exactly like someone who can like make systems and stick with them regardless of how small something seems. Because like at the end of the day, like we're not making just regular projects. We're not making like a book or like a lipstick. We're making something that has to like work, that has to go together. So if a component in a game is necessary or like an unnecessary custom upgrade just because it's fun, like that's important to know. I wouldn't want to suggest on a project that we can just, forget this custom piece. Let's just source something that already exists when in the reality, like it's required for the gameplay. Not knowing that tiny piece of information could like destroy the entire game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we've already talked about like being straight shooter. What other personality things do you think you bring to the table? And that if you were to hire, say, like your replacement, what would they need to have?
Something that I don't know.
I don't.
Job.
I did not talk to anybody at Arcane today.
Ben's trying for your job. He just didn't tell.
No. I did well. So this is just me going on the thing that I think the industry does need more project managers. So I'm saying,
what if I had these traits, I would know that I'm probably good to be a project manager. What might they be?
Someone who's not overly ambitious. I think being a realist is really important when it comes to project managing. Like knowing the right amount to bite off, not under, performing, but not overcommitting and disappointing everyone. So like being a realist and figuring out what the right balance there is, I think is so important, especially, I'm going to reference Peter, working with him. He's so ambitious. He always assumes like the best is going to happen. And that's a great trait for creative, but it doesn't necessarily work in a project management role. So
Sure.
I think that's a really important trait. Organization.
Not being negative. Remember, it's not being negative.
It's the difference
Being
between
realistic.
being overly optimistic is not the same thing.
I also have a
No, that's
really
great.
weird brain for logistics. Like I can like route maps in my head and like see everything on a calendar. I could tell you like the date I put in my notice for 3 jobs,
Do you
6
see it
years
as
ago.
a picture? Do you see it as words, or how do you store it? I'm just curious.
I see it as like a puzzled timeline. It's I guess pictures, but I
Okay.
kind of can like map like what I was doing at any given like month in my life based on like what would have also been happening around that time. I've never met anyone else who can do that, but like I definitely use it to my advantage when like I'm booking
It's good
for
story.
shipping containers and like what conversation did we have 9 months ago? I can kind of like pinpoint what that was and where I was when we had it.
It's awesome.
That's really cool. So that's your superpower. So
That's
you
my
did
superpower.
have like when you were bitten by a spider, you did get some superpowers.
Well, it's
Not
a
only
little
did you
bit.
become a gamer, you got
Like-
superpowers.
baby eidetic almost, right? Because
Yeah.
Yeah.
at the rate you're
yeah.
recalling, but it sounds like you're recalling. That's why I was curious on how you saw it up here. Some people hear things, some people see things, some people. It's interesting. I always find it interesting.
I see dead
It's
people.
weird because I hear my thoughts. Like I narrate my thoughts.
Oh,
but,
see, like
that,
I think in like pictures, and other
Really?
people don't get that. Like I can visually construct, right?
that's crazy.
I do
mean,
both.
that's-
I
Yeah.
hear my thoughts, like
I can
Nicole's
hear
saying,
myself too.
but I see everything that I
some
do
people
in my
see
head.
words. They don't hear the words. They
I-
see the words.
like they're reading the words in
Yeah.
their head.
I don't have.
Yeah,
That's-
they're weird. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
can't
You're
imagine.
totally fine. It's just
Fascinating
different. You're just
how
different than
people
me.
store information.
Yeah, it's really interesting how memory's encoded. We can have a whole
Hmm.
we can have a whole show on that one day if we want. There's a couple words when we send out our onboarding information. We ask our guests to answer some questions, and let me tell you that Nicole was probably the most wordy out of all our guests, like in the history of the 5, 6, 7 years that we've done People Syrup. She like wrote like these treaties and stuff. She used words that like we need to know the definition. So she used this word, pre-production, and I thought it'd be really good to go through a couple of words that Nicole used so that we can talk about what these words mean for the industry. So what is pre-production? Why are you involved with pre-production as the manager of projects? And why is it important for games to go through pre-production?
So pre-production is basically anything that happens before it hits the printer. So from when a game gets signed, there's, depending on the company, there's going to be a development process where the game is tested multiple times, has whatever iterations are going to happen before it's kind of locked in mechanically. And then contractors are assigned for art, or it goes to someone on the team who is a staff artist, as well as graphic design, which is like the iconography, the text, the overall layout of the game. And also involved in pre-production would be setting the rule book, having it edited, proofread, laid out, and all the graphic design and art that goes into that is in like an entire process of its own. And then whatever additional internal processes there are for like proofreading and approvals, that's all the pre-production stage before it goes off to the printer.
Right. Okay. And then you mentioned that you were involved in a localization project. What does localization mean for you, and what is your role as a manager of projects for that?
So localization would be when a company can work with another company in a different language to bring it a title that exists in France or Germany or wherever it may have originated into English, or vice versa. Sometimes, especially with Pandasaurus, I'd work to bring our English titles into other markets. So for Arcane Wonders right now, I'm working on Mortem, which we are localizing from a company, publisher Lavka. And we're really excited about this title. So right now I'm working with our proofreaders to go through the game, the text, and make sure the translations are accurate and understandable before it then goes to an editor who makes any edits that need to happen. And there are a lot of iterations in that process.
Right. So even when it's localized, it's not just as easy as, getting a Google translation and printers.
Don't do that.
Please don't do that. We have a question from the audience. Adam Young asks, how do you deal with unknowns as a project manager? If there's something you not find out when you need to, how do you keep sane and keep the rest of the project going? How do you avoid being in this situation? Those are good questions.
That's a really good question. So, to avoid being in that situation whenever possible, I build in extra time into my projects. If a printer's telling me that something's going to take 45 days, I assume that it's going to take 60 days, and that just gives me a little bit buffer to like chase someone down if I need to, without we are 1 day late, which means we're already behind on our timeline. So that's what I do basically every step along the way, so that I can borrow time where I need it.
So you're the padding builder. You
I was
build
gonna
padding
say,
around stuff.
do you have a bit of a, is it all instinct at this point? How much do you add to each of your buffers, or do you have kind of like a rule of thumb? It's like, look, you say this, I'm automatically assuming this.
I tend to round. So if someone says 6 weeks, I say 8. If someone says 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, it's a month. It really depends on the person I'm working with. There are editors that I work with regularly who I know, like, if you tell me that it's going to be ready on the 28th, I know it's going to be the 20th. And maybe I'll build it a weekend in case you're running late, but like, I can trust you. Whereas if like I'm working with an artist for the first time ever, I'm probably going to give them an extra 2 weeks, or tell them that the deadline's 2 weeks sooner than I actually needed, just so I'm not chasing someone down and making them feel pressured and stressed because I have a deadline to hit. That's something I always want to avoid. If I am contracting someone, if I have the time to say like, okay, we don't need it for 6 weeks and it's going to take 4 weeks to do, I want to work on that now, so that if something happens in that contractor's life that's distracting them from work, I'm not breathing down their neck. And I think that's really important for everyone's morale.
Yeah, and it really makes for. Go ahead, Erica.
Oh, I was gonna say, the nice thing is too, it gives you that time to pivot, because there's always going to be something at some point that goes wrong or doesn't work or just wasn't what you were planning on. And if you don't have that time you've been adding, like accruing for that buffering, that 2 weeks is enough to change the art. Without it, you're not going to.
Right.
No, it really makes for nice interpersonal relationships too, is what I was going to say. There's a real healthy attitude that you bring to the table in terms of, you want good relationships. You don't want to be breathing down somebody's neck. And, that not only makes you look good, but it makes them feel good. And I think that's really important to bring out, that this extra padding that you're building around is within, project parameters, but it's also very helpful for everybody involved to have that breathing room. Are you, in your own personal life, Nicole, a procrastinator?
Yes.
That is hilarious.
Life, but you'll
hilarious.
Yeah, I'm one of those for work, like I am on the ball and I put all that energy into work. So when it comes to my personal life, it's like I will get to like weeding the garden whenever I feel like it.
That's not a prayer. It's a prioritizing thing. It's not a procrastination.
Yeah. and how and who is depending on that? Because I'm sure you don't procrastinate feeding the baby. Julie says, Nicole is the nicest taskmaster ever, but make no mistake, she wants you to hit your goals.
But that's her.
True.
She should want you.
True story.
Also, hi Julie. Hi Robert.
Hi.
Robert is asking question.
What's up?
What's up?
That we have you like, what's up?
What's up?
What's up?
Is it a question?
I mean, there's a question mark. Is it actually implied? It can be rhetorical.
It's more of a greeting from Robert, to be honest. So, yeah, if anybody else out there in Meeple Starplan has questions for Nicole about project management, about any of the other stuff, we can totally get to that. But we're about to get a little bit spicy up in the joint. Little deep. Jumping off into the deep end here, because we asked Nicole what she wanted to talk about, and she said this.
So many things.
Wage transparency in tabletop. This is one of them. There are many more. We'll get to them. So what's up about wage transparency, Nicole?
This is like something that's become a passion of mine the last year, because I have so many friends in this industry who are barely making livable wages.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that I haven't been in that circumstance in this industry, but we're, especially in America, I don't know how it is in Canada because you guys have so many better programs than we do. But in America, we're pushing really hard for a $15 minimum wage, and that's, you know, what, $30,000 a year. I know so many people in this industry who are making between 30 or 35. And that is what we're right now acknowledging to be like the bare minimum to like have a life. And the professionals who I know in this industry who are making that tend to have a spouse who are helping them pay the bills, who are, you know, considered the breadwinners. And I hate that that's the case. I am so frustrated that this industry pushes the ideal that there's no margin and in board games, and that's partially true, but the way to combat that is not to subsidize it with employee wages.
Like,
yes.
And kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you need a person, if you need an employee to run your business, to make your business succeed, then you need to pay them a fair wage. And if you can't afford it, then you can't afford to be in business. And that is the case for any non-creative industry. And I wish it was the case here too.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who get, you know, a little bit taken advantage of perhaps because of their passion, right? Of their wanting for this thing to exist and their belief in the product, which is lovely and everything like that. But here's the deal. Just because it is hobby gaming doesn't mean this is a hobby for the people who work in it. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more.
I think that was kind of a big point we're actually talking about just before we started recording, was just that idea that this industry is primarily made up of people who have sort of decided to be part of it, not because necessarily they are employed by it. So you have an industry that is pseudo propped up by people who are basically they're just hobbyists. They're people who are doing this for the fun. It is not their main job. In fact, they all have other jobs. Almost all have another job, right? And so, yeah, it's really taking advantage of the fact that these people, to a degree, have the luxury, right, of this other job, so you can buy their stuff for cheap, right? Because they don't have to live off of it.
Exactly. And another thing that I find frustrating and that my heart goes out for is there are so many times where I'm trying to get a quote from a contractor, and I know that is a frustrating, anxiety-inducing process for a freelancer to give you a quote for development, for art, for editing, whatever it is. And so many times they say, this is my hourly rate. This isn't the amount of hours that I think it might take for a project, but please tell me if that sounds like too much. And I'm like, I feel for this freelancer who is, you know, going into an anxiety attack. Are they going to turn me off? Are they going to like miss out on a job because I'm going to think that their hourly rate is too high?
They're already devaluing themselves before you've even met them.
Yeah. In their head already.
How many situations are other publishers taking advantage of, like, yeah, actually, can you do it in 10 hours instead of 20? And maybe there are freelancers who are saying yes and still working the 20 and only billing for 10.
Which is what they're doing. Let's be honest.
I can guarantee there are, just by the nature of creative work, right?
Unfortunately, it's hard. You gotta earn. Well, because it's one of those things. Not only do you have to earn a reputation, but you actually have to earn in a different way than most industries. You have to earn your knowledge. Right? Like there's no like how-to guide on the board game industry. It's sort of like you learn as you go, which is partly why there's no transparency here, is basically unless we all talk to each other, nobody knows anything.
Exactly. And yeah, no one knows anything. I was telling Eric and Sen beforehand, you know, Cardboard Edison has this infographic, what designers make, what is normal for royalties, but we don't have anything like that for freelancers, for customer service staff, for project managers, for production managers. There's no standards. And you see these job postings where it's like depending on experience, but what's the range? Like if I'm coming in with 20 years experience, like give me a range. That are you hiring for $30,000 a year or 70? Like there's no information anywhere. So I actually had a situation a few months back where I was talking to a a friend of mine who was talking about the rates, and I was like, I work with editors. I know that your peers are quoting $5 to $10 an hour more than you. Raise your rates, please. Like, I know that might not always put me in the best position for hiring people, but I want the industry to be able.
Yeah, you save someone their livelihood. It means they get to stay in the industry. All these people, unfortunately, the thing that ends up happening out of this is that all these people end up getting used up, burnt out, whatever it is, or just disillusioned. They disappear. Fine, the next batch comes in, but you can't maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd like to get those of us who wear a little bit more privilege armor than others in terms of us having, say, another job that is pretty well paying, to maybe rethink your strategies around getting those contracts. I walk away from anything that is less than 10 cents a minute, 10 cents a word for writing. For like when I write RPGs, that's the bare minimum. Why? Because I want everybody who writes in RPGs to make at least 10 cents a word, because there are people out there that are giving people 5 cents a word or 3 cents a word. And that is ridiculous. So I won't work for your project unless it's at least 10 cents a word. But I have that privilege because I have another income, I guess, right? But the more of us, who say no and keep saying no, hopefully people will get the idea that, well, I have to raise my rate. I have to raise what I'm paying people, what I'm offering people a little bit more. There's so much, work on spec, contests to design a logo, so much of that going on, that if you don't work in the industry professionally, on a long-term and ongoing basis, you think it's awesome. You think it's great.
It has that illusion of, this is a great way to get into the industry. Look what opportunity I've been given. But unfortunately, it really just says, look, I've been asked to work for free, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I mean,
there's a really unfortunate line with these things, and I know most of the publishers aren't even doing this on purpose.
No,
they're not. They just don't know.
Just not thinking about what the actual conclusion of all these actions become.
Yeah, and then the other thing to remember is that from the flip side of that, if you, as a creative, offer somebody to do stuff for free, that's okay. You can still totally do that, but that's on you. You said you were going to do that. It's not an employer saying, "Can you work for really cheap?" If you want to say, "I will work for really cheap," that's a little bit different. And so there are definitely things like I will mentor people for free. I will give away free advice left, right, and center. You do not have to pay me for any of that. But as soon as it has to be really specific, like, hey, tell me about each and every card in this 60 card set. We're talking development, and that's going to be at my hourly rates, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's more like you give free advice, but not necessarily you're giving a free product. There's a difference.
No, but some artists will draw stuff for free or give away a free icon set, and that's their call.
That could be a promotional tool, right? Mm-hmm. That's different. That they weren't asked to do that, though. That's
exactly. Like, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
you can ask me a question on Twitter that I can feel, compelled to answer or not, but don't expect me to show up for a meeting and not bill you.
Right. Yeah. That's a great example. If I'm at your beck and call, it's going to cost you.
We should all act like lawyers, like not their fees, but I mean the fact that it's expected that it's like, fine, you picked up the phone and called me for this. That is part of me working, right?
I have an app for that.
Well,
I do have an app for that.
Like, I remember when I was working in advertising, and to call our legal person would be like $500 just for the call. And so it'd be like the only call we really needed to.
Don't call it ever.
But at the same time, it's this standardized, it's completely standardized. You know exactly
it totally is, right?
It costs every time you do it. You know exactly what you've got on retainer and why. Like, we need that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So I have contracts with lawyers, like, anytime you call me, this is what I'm charging you. But not for game design, obviously.
It makes you second guess, like, do I need to reach out to this person? And I know so many freelancers who are messaging on Facebook after hours, coordinating, when does this need to be due? Okay, this designer wanted to change something in the rule book. And like, you should, I'm telling my friends, you should be billing for that time. Anytime that's taking away from your family, that you're talking about a specific project that you were hired to work on, that is billable hours, charge them.
Yeah. If you work on an hourly basis, right? Adam says, that he freelanced in other industries, general web strategy and design. All of the things that we're talking about are true. Chasing payment is a big deal as a freelancer because you
Yes.
never want to poke people too hard. And then waiting to know when something will turn into real money is anxiety provoking, and he had to stop. Yeah, I can get that, right? Because it's like, when is my next paycheck coming in? Rent is due, right? We know rent is due, but is that check ever coming, right?
Mhm.
Amy is saying that people deserve to be paid. Love this conversation. Great. Giorgio is asking, oh, this is a question. What's the most unexpected work that you had to outsource as a project manager? Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm. There was a project that I was working on with Pandasaurus that was surprisingly specific as far as the mechanics of control. Figuring out how those pieces work together was more than just a 3D modeler. We had to get like someone who like knew specifications and like the plastic and how it would
Wow.
like click and how it would fall apart. So I actually hired my friend who was a mechanical engineer. I never thought that I would need like a mechanical engineer to do the 3D modeling for a board game, but it helped.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Robert says, I'll just say that Nicole has hit the ground running here at Arcane Wonders and is already a very valuable member of the team. There you go.
Robert.
Oh,
Thanks,
Robert.
Robert.
And Adam Young is saying it may not always be applicable to tabletop, but there's a website called nospec.com, and there's some helpful thoughts there about what else is forgotten when doing spec work. So that's more for those of us who are freelancing out here. What might we forget to bill for? What might we forget to, think as this should go in my hours? All those kinds of stuff. It's pretty funny. I was actually just looking at speaking rates because I do a lot of public speaking, and you know you can charge like so
I was
much
gonna say
money for
that thing
public
is
speaking.
all over the place. It's like whatever they're
It's
willing to.
ridiculous,
Well,
and
think how
we
many
don't do
ex-presidents
that.
make all their money off of basically speaking tours
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
really hundreds of thousands of dollars just to show up and be like,
Mhm.
"Hey, listen to me speak." Like
yeah,
that's all it takes.
yeah. And it's super interesting because a lot of the cons and stuff like that, we're just happy to be on panels, right?
Well, yeah, it's
Uh,
because it's exposure because we don't have classic marketing or media.
Yeah, so it's really quite an interesting thing because I mean, obviously, because I actually looked, and I don't speak academically much anymore, but it's I could charge thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It's ridiculous, but the game industry doesn't have that kind of thing, and I don't know why. Not at least the board game industry. So there's a lot going on here. So wage transparency. What can we do about it? What's your ideas here, Nicole?
I don't know. I don't know how to fix the problem. I'm very transparent with anyone who knows me. If they ask, where I started with my salary in this industry, where I'm at, where I hope to be in 5 years, I will tell you. Like I mean, probably not on a live stream because there are balances to everything, but I've had candid conversations with my friends, coworkers, peers, professional mentors. I undervalued myself coming into the industry, but I'm very happy with where I am now, and
Cool.
I plan to not. I have not made under $45,000 since I've been in this industry, and I will not go under that. I will move to a different industry before I make less than my worth.
Right.
So I want to help my peers get to the same spot who aren't there yet.
Right.
And anything I can do to help. If someone's a freelancer and isn't sure, you do proofreading and you're not sure what other proofreaders charge, I'm happy to have that conversation. Like I see proofreaders charge between X and between Y, and I will be as transparent as I can. And obviously, sometimes someone's a little bit more qualified or more experienced, and that's an important factor. But I think the more information that the workers have in this industry, the more equipped we are to
Hmm.
stop accepting the norm that we just don't deserve the salary that we do deserve.
I
Yeah.
think it's also helping people understand of how to either ask or say these things. So it's funny. I posted something just because I thought it was a really nice way of like basically 4 different ways of saying I don't work for free, because I see this happening way too much, right? Just especially when it comes to like illustrators, graphic designers, and RPG writers. A ton. Is basically you work for nothing. And it was amazing how I think I'd already had like in less than a week, had like 1,500 likes, because all these people were like just looking for someone to say, by the way, this is probably what you should be saying, so you can get what's appropriate for you. I feel like people devalue themselves on such a huge level. It's not that, again, being really clear, we're not telling you to monetize your hobby. This is not the same conversation. We're talking about the industry here, right? And it's a really important thing to say. It's like, no, I have rates, right? Like this is what I usually charge. Would you like to discuss my packages? Would you there's ways of approaching that subject so that you're not the one being taken advantage of. And I think people almost need the words in order to be able to express that stuff.
It's hard to articulate, right?
Most people aren't direct or confrontational either. So if you give them a polite way out, they probably are going to use it.
Or if they're Canadian.
There's also a lot of helping each other in this industry, asking peers for advice. So it's definitely a hard line to walk with, like, how much will I give you, especially if you're my friend, how much advice am I willing to give you? And I think that line for me is like, do you expect me on a call at 9 a.m.? Because if I owe you something, you are paying me for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really easy transactional way to look at there's relationships. We are friends, but we still could have a professional relationship, right? And I'm friends with lots of the people that publish my games, but when it's business, right? I think another thing.
Well,
go ahead.
The weird thing of our industry in general, we have very blurry lines between friendship and work. In the hobby industry, mass is different, but in the hobby industry, because it is very much people who literally work, the publisher works out of their home. It's a very different reality. I think that's another thing we're going to have to be really careful of, and probably also why people are getting devalued is, oh, but that's my buddy. They can do it for this price. That's my friend who does this. Oh, they want an opportunity to get into the industry. This is perfect for me. There's too much of this blend between the friend and business. And it's very problematic, because it also leads often to this quick switch off of like, oh, but this is the business part. Oh, but this is the friend part. Oh, but this is the business part. It's like, that doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And then it ends up being a little bit of gaslighting and all that kind of stuff. What I'd like to see is some more just like red flags to tell people this is predatory or this is verging on abuse. Because there are some contracts out there that are definitely predatory. There are some contracts out there that should be illegal. There is a level at which, you need to, as a creative, draw the line. But that line doesn't just affect you. And that's kind of the thing that I think we're talking about. The industry as a whole is affected by it when you take a job for less than, parity. And I know we're not talking unions. We're not talking like Screen Actors Guild or whatever.
Average, like a baseline, like
plus or minus a couple. And the idea of having these wild differences in percentages, like why are they, and why can't we talk about them? Why does the tabletop industry tend to write clauses in their contracts that say you cannot disclose the contents of this contract to anybody? Why is that?
That should almost be one of those like, but what am I hiding for you?
Right. Exactly.
It's funny because occasionally, again, as we talked about, most of the information in this industry is purely word of mouth, right? It's amazing sometimes when you finally get information from somebody and you find out, good or bad, it's like, you made how much on that game? And sometimes you're floored at how little someone made on something that honestly did really well. You're like, you're guessing, let's say a really high number, and you hear something else. You're like, what did your contract look like? And then other times where you can tell that the publisher totally took care of them. They made sure they were making, publishers who started including like app clauses before it was a thing. Stuff like where they're intentionally trying to make sure that the the like basically your talent is covered.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that all comes with a little bit of reasonableness as well. So like anybody who's out there going, yeah, designers need like 20%. It's like you
No,
can't,
they don't
because
have the market.
Doesn't-
the margin isn't there for that.
No.
But the margin is there for more than 3%,
Yeah,
depending on,
it's
if there's
ridiculous.
licenses involved.
Yeah, well, even with licenses, I mean, knowing that, like, well, why not a scale of some kind, right? Like, production scales are absolutely negotiable with licenses. So maybe, the license is starting at, like, let's say the average IP is still only at 3 or 4% because they have to pay the licensor, but you might be able to negotiate that 0.5% at higher print runs and things like that. Like, there are options there. But yeah, I mean, other than, I think we made that infographic on what should hopefully appear in your contract, but I don't know if we've ever gone past that.
No, no, and Nicole, the stuff that you're bringing up about wage transparency, the only thing that we've seen so far, like you mentioned, is the aggregate from the infographic Cardboard Edison.
Yeah.
So maybe we should think about doing something like that for other roles in the industry, because there are so many other people who are involved in making these games a reality, right? It doesn't just take one.
I would love that, and I would volunteer my time to work on that because
Let's
I
talk
think
about
it's
it.
so important.
I feel like
Eric Dahlman heard the call.
You mentioned licenses and Eric poofs.
Yes, it's so funny. Julie asks, "Hey Nicole, what are your favorite scheduling tools?"
I was actually going to ask you the same thing about some of your favorite like programs or apps.
So I
not a spreadsheet.
not a spreadsheet. I love anything that allows you to customize your flow, your workflow, and the tabs that you need. I've recently, in the last year or so, gotten really into Monday because it can basically function as whatever you need. It can be an Excel sheet with customizable like tabs or fields, or you can have an agile view and still like it.
What is that?
It's
Monday?
Oh, you haven't seen
Monday.com.
Monday yet? But it is a paid program. We'll just be clear about that. But it's very clever.
It's very affordable too. If you're a single person trying to organize your just game designs or whatever, it is like $10 a month or something, reasonably affordable. Yeah. And actually, until the last few years, I'd always like balked at those kinds of fees. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to use this service, enough to justify those costs. And Peter, who I'm going to talk about a lot because he's a big influence in my life in a positive way. He was like, if this saves you an hour a month, isn't that worth the $10? Like, even if it's just an hour. And it took hearing that to like wrap my head around it. So I love Monday, and for team building, I love any kind of like Slack, Discord, any kind of communications where everyone can be in the same group and then organized by specific projects, so you have that history of communication on like what is happening on this thing without any kind of other crowded information just gumming up that communication.
Perfect. Eric Slauson yelled your name.
Hi,
Nicole. There you go.
Hello, Eric.
Who doesn't? Eric's the best.
He's the best.
He is. So, wage transparency, we'll talk about it off air, and we'll see if we can get something going. I think it's a really interesting thing to look into.
You know what might be interesting? I mean,
What's
again,
that?
People might not necessarily share everything. Okay, remember a little while ago, I've seen this for a few groups doing this. Well, what they want to do is it's almost like put together a little bio sheet of yourself and we'll share all of them, right? Like, I want to know, maybe you're focusing right now. I want to know like BIPOC creators. I want to know female creators. I want to know Asian creators. And I'm going to just like start, retweeting like any of these things that pop up. There's not to say that we couldn't create something similar where maybe you're not sharing everything, but there's a few different pieces of information that could be shared where it's like, average percent per game or, average cost per project or whatever it is, that we start finding a way of kind of opening this up more.
Mm-hmm.
Also thinking maybe we like if I ever try to bite this off like an anonymous Google survey,
Something that could be
so
found
that
to
Yeah, I mean, and
compile.
that's
yeah.
how Cardboard Edison did it.
Do that
Yeah,
like do you work for yourself or do you work for someone else? Because
Yeah.
if you work for yourself, like that's already like a different ballpark. And
Yeah.
like, how many years of experience do you have? What do you charge per hour? How many hours a month are you booked? Like if you're charging $80 an hour and you're booked solid, it's very, different than someone who's charging $20 an hour and can't find work. Like maybe there are different reasons. I don't know. I'm a data
No,
junkie,
there's a.
so
I was gonna say, yeah, between a Google form or like a data, like a monkey, like a chip, whatever data chip monkey, whatever the hell it's called right now, Survey Monkey. That's it. Something where you can get that back end data if you ask all the right questions, right?
yeah,
So
we can help with that. That'd be super fun.
maybe that's
I
something
like data.
that we do through Maple Syrup because we've
Yeah,
been looking.
Dylan loves data.
I was gonna say we
So-
can't sponsor people, but that doesn't mean we can't necessarily sponsor an initiative.
Yeah, Dylan's a data scientist, so he would love to do something like that, and he's obviously tabletop oriented.
Just
So
make it, very approachable, you know what I mean? Kind of very easygoing, but ask the right type of questions. I think that would just be invaluable.
yeah, I mean that's really the art of it all is surveying correctly. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. And I told you all that we were going to get spicy, and if you didn't think wage transparency was spicy enough, Nicole wanted to also talk about self-publishing, yay or nay. And Nicole's answer is nay.
nay, I know it's
Don't.
such an unpopular opinion in this
Okay, and
industry.
that's okay. That's
Unless
okay.
you're that crazy outlier. She's saying do not self-publish.
Okay, so why
There's
not?
always an exception. Let's just put it that way, because there's always someone who can be in their head like, right, just like, but listen, Nicole. Listen to why she says. Maybe she's talking to you, maybe not, but you got to find that out.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the Patrick leaders and the Isaacs and the Frost Havens and the crazy campaigns that just would not have existed without self-publishing. And to be clear, I want to asterisk, I love Kickstarter. I think it's an incredible tool. So many projects would not have existed without it. But I've also seen so many people lose money not knowing that that was a possibility on a project. I will always advocate for pitching to a publisher who has, the publishing board game, Julie. I will always advocate for pitching to a publisher who has a system, who knows the industry, who understands what the proper margins are on a game, who knows the market, who has a team, who are working full time to see a project through. It's just so invaluable. And like having a smaller piece of a bigger pie can still end up meaning more money at the end of the day.
Amy's a good example of someone who's kickstarted too on her own, but I think you're going to find that's not always the success case for a lot of people.
No, and there's a lot of times when Eric is saying that it's possible to lose money on a project that looks like a success from the outside. And that's entirely true. Like I've known projects who were totally sunk because shipping oil prices went up by like 25 cents per liter. Or gallons, sorry, Americans. And it just, went ridiculously. They ended up being, in the hole. There are so many project creators out there who've had, multiple funded things. And they're like, yeah, we're just starting to break even. And that is actually very similar to like lots of restaurateur stories, people who are entrepreneurs, they don't expect to make money for the first couple of years. And that's fine. I think, Nicole's saying that there are companies that have systems in place to maximize the potential for profit, not only for them, but for you as well, right? As the designer. So tell me, Nicole, what if you were to play the other side, what are some reasons why you would say somebody should self-publish?
Oh, I've never been asked this question before.
He's like, stop it. My stance is the opposite.
I know. I'm just kind of.
I feel like this is like
high school
the
debate club.
Team. Yeah,
it is.
I like I said, there are always going to be the Patrick leaders, the Isaacs, the projects that never would have existed without someone taking that chance. And it is important to have, those people in the industry who are willing to take that chance. But I feel that if you are going to go that route, do everything you can to get as much information on the process as you can beforehand. Use the industry resources that are at our disposal. Ask our peers. Pay for consultations if that is an option for you. And know that a Kickstarter that successfully funded $25,000 might have lost money at the end of the day.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of it is not based on how much money you have. It's based on, did you actually set that price correctly?
Yeah.
Did you build in all the padding you need around shipping errors? Did you do any of that? Right?
You
Lots of
collected
stuff.
25,000 where your expense is 30, like maybe.
Well, I think the other thing for people too is, I mean, because we do have a few people, even in our chat right now that have been, successful on their own. Talk to those people.
Amy, Zach.
I talk to those people though. If you honestly are going to take this route and you can't hire, let's say yourself, a lovely Nicole, well, then go poke everybody you can that has kind of a similar, maybe they've launched the same number as you. Maybe it's in a similar vein than you. You need to do your research. And there's lots out there, but I would go to the source and actually talk to people, especially if it's recent. Because there's things like, for example, I didn't know until we had someone on the show that there's an extra percent cost if you run a Kickstarter in Canada, for example, or things like that, where it's like, I wouldn't have known that until someone said it, right? Because this is not stuff that's disclosed on the same level. So it's like, okay, wait, so you're actually saying I'd be better off having an American partner or something. Like, you know what I mean? There's all these things you just didn't know was about to cost you something.
And you don't know what you don't know. Like maybe there are 50 other things. I will say that if someone wants to run a business, like that's a good reason to self-publish. I know a lot of creators who want to be designers who don't know publishers and think, well, this is how I can be a designer. Those are the ones who I would advise not to do it. If you want to run a business, if you want to build a company from the ground up, if you want to be your own boss and do the accounting and do the business, development and do sales, and not care that 90% of your day is in spreadsheets and project management software rather than designing, then self-publishing might be for you. But I think a lot of new creators don't realize that you can't self-publish and just be a full-time game designer at the same time, because so much of your time is going to be dedicated
unless
to
you hire somebody like Nicole.
Well,
see, we need to clone Nicole.
You're going to spend way more time on any of your management stuff than you ever will being creative on your actual games.
Yeah. Julie put it very well. Like, if you realize that publishing is the world's hardest euro, and you are here for it, all caps.
It's like the craziest worker placement you've ever done, but you don't know which parts are going to pay out as you go.
There's no heuristic for scoring. Adam Young.
Yeah, it's like when you get back, is like the meeple's still there? I don't know, but we'll find out.
I don't know. Yeah. Adam said that he's seen a lot of folks who didn't understand what Canada safe shipping meant and ended up having to reimburse a lot of duty and brokerage fees. Oh, this is a hilarious story because it's not. But when Jay did the Fail Faster journal, he didn't get made in China printed on the product. And so he had to...
Canada, right?
Exactly. So he had to print out 10,000 stickers and hand sticker them.
Yeah,
because you have to by law do that.
You have to disclose where something comes from, what's in it, all that fun stuff, depending on what it is. So in Canada, people don't know this, we'll end up having to have those specialty stickers printed and stuck on products just to have the updated information.
Right, and so all the time and money lost for that was just a big pain in the butt.
So it's funny how many game shop owners I know that actually order often like the European version, or like, almost like the European publishers, because it often already has, let's say, the French version or like the right spelling or things like that.
Not the American version.
Don't think about.
Yeah. Eric is saying that, answering Kickstarter comments is a huge job. And Amy's saying that for her at Pink Tiger Games, it all goes in cycles and she does it all solo.
Yeah.
And she does it well. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's what she wants to do. And she's got a system down that works for her, and she's been successful publishing 3 games. So it's not that it's not possible, and it's not that it's just not for everybody. And I think that's really what Nicole is cautioning against, is that it seems like this magic lamp that you just rub and money comes out of it, Kickstarter, but
Or it'll
there's so much
jumpstart your
more
design
that
career
goes
kind of
into
thing.
it. Yeah. And so, like, people always ask me, like, they say, Sen, but you could have had 100% of that, $1 million that you made on whatever game.
Ew.
It's like, yeah, but then I'd have to do 100% of the work. And I don't want to do 100% of that. I don't want to do any of the work that
I don't want to do anything
Az does or
logistical,
anybody.
like at
No.
all.
And the funny thing is that I bet I'd be good at it, but I don't want to be good
But
at
that's
it.
not the job we want, right?
No,
And
not at
also
all.
that's someone else's job. Let's be fair. These are all separate jobs. We should not have one person doing all of them. There are very people who are that good at that many jobs.
Amy wants the magic money. And Zach Connolly is saying that he self-publishes. Because he does that, he tends to design with constraints, like in a box, so he knows what he can manage as far as a product. He doesn't overextend himself, and so they tend to be small games. So I think having realistic understanding of the industry as well, and what you can handle as a one-person show. And Amy's pretty much the same way. I mean, all of Amy's games are basically card games, like massive amounts of cards, like not just a deck of cards, but lots of cards in a small box. So they're different product types, and she is hustling, getting sales at places that hobby games don't go, because she's really good at that end of things. So, I think they're Robert is saying that, hey there, I do a lot of jobs.
Yeah,
And even
Robert
does. We know that.
supposed to do all the jobs. That's the point.
Yes,
You're
Robert.
I think Robert works like 70 hours a week.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah, he likes
Robert,
it though.
You're not a good example. Don't say these things.
making us all look bad.
You do too many people's jobs.
Yeah. Wait a minute. We're over time, so we've got to get going. But it was lovely, lovely, lovely having Nicole here with us today. And if you are interested in reaching out to Nicole, she is available on Twitter at Sidekick Nicole. So, okay, I told you before I was going to ask you why Sidekick Nicole. So why Sidekick Nicole?
So I always, for the last few years, I've kind of conceptualized myself as a sidekick because I don't want to run my own business. I want to make someone else's business shine.
And
I
that's
like
cool. Hey, a lot of people's favorites are Disney sidekicks anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So let's be honest,
Totally
the
a
sidekicks
sidekick.
are often like everyone's favorite.
Yeah, I like Thumper, right? Thumper's better than Bambi.
Thunder.
I have a Thumper upstairs.
ArcaneWonders.com is where Nicole is working currently, and for the foreseeable future, bringing out wonderful products. What's next coming up from Arcane Wonders that you will have had your fingerprint on?
That you're able to plug, that is.
Mortem is the first thing that I'm working on. I'm really excited for that.
Very cool. And that's coming from an Italian company, you said?
Russia, Lapka.
I was going to say just
okay, cool.
that's in a bunch of languages, but you can explain more about that later.
Very cool. And if you're looking for myself and Erica, we are at Meeple Syrup on Twitter.
And Facebook.
I am at Senfeng Lim. And Erica, where are you?
I'm at Erica Bouiris, or in general, just Erica B on stuff.
Yes. And if you want Jessie, just tweet at Erica, and she'll then
tweet at me.
poke
See what
Jessie.
I can do.
If you liked what you heard tonight, please try to support us on our Patreon, www.patreon.com/MeepleSyrup. Helps us to keep the lights on here. And last note, before we tell you what's on next week, is PechaKuchCon 21. The deadline is this Friday for your 6-minute and 40-second video. I'm making my slides right now, so you're not too late to get yours in. Hopefully we'll have about an hour, 2 hours of content for people just to like watch and learn. I don't know who else is doing stuff. I'm doing like 3 psychological theories and how I apply them to game design. And so, hopefully some of you get yours done as well.
I was
That
going
would
to
be
say,
wonderful.
and if we get permission on the ones that maybe are best received, it'd be really nice maybe to push them out on Twitter too, so they can get a few more eyes on them.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably put them out first on the Meeple Syrup Show.
The Patreon
Shop Talk.
and Shop Talk.
And then put it out to the wider audience if people are okay with that, because it'll be people talking, right?
If we have permission.
Yeah. It'll be your voices and stuff like that. So I don't want to do that if you don't want it. And sometimes people might actually have their face like a little picture-in-picture or whatnot. Final advice from Nicole. What is your final piece of advice?
Something that you want everyone, if they're going to take home something from you today, what should they take home?
Do as much research as you can on what you're offering before you offer it.
That's fair. I know your competition is, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the competition, they're not really the competition, but it just was a segue. Next week, we have Debbie and Rob from Wise Wizard Games.
I love that.
They are so wonderful. And they're going to come up and they're going to talk about a game that is not Star Realms.
We've been trying to have Debbie on for a bit, so this is good.
Yeah, it'll be wonderful. So we'll see everybody next week here on the Meeple Syrup Show. Thank you very much to Giorgio, Amy, AJ, Julie, Zach, Robert, Eric, Adam. Who else? I think that's it. Everybody who talked and anybody else who was watching the show. Bill, Eric. There are more people. See, I told you there's more people. I don't need to say Robert twice.
These are just the people who commented. That's the only problem is we used to be able to see like how many people are watching. Now we can't. We only see if people comment.
Oh, I can see some more people. I can see people who liked or starred things. So Jim as well is another person who didn't comment, but did give us a thumbs up. So there you go. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. We'll see you here next week, same place, same time. And we'll be here on Friday for the Friday Night Forum as well, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Well, not Standard, it's Daylight Saving Time. Whatever 8 o'clock is.
Eastern.
Okay, I'll see you later. Bye, Nicole. Thanks very much.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Bye.